absent some kind of a vision about where we're all going, you go wherever you feel like going or wherever kind of conditions kind of push you. If you don't have a map or if you don't have a destination, then any place kind of suffices. And so it's really kind of critical in this most extraordinary kind of transition to a new world that we began to get some kind of an idea about what that world is, and it starts to frame that. Now, I think that this needs to become formalized and rigorous, and that you need to start to build images and pictures in your mind about what this new world would look like. Because again, absent something that is defined and clear, it is it becomes very hard to, everybody's got a different idea. So the objective in the end is to accelerate this whole process, and that gets done by getting a whole lot of folks in trained and have a common kind of vision and idea about where they want to go and where we all want to go. And what that then does is kind of coalesce and concentrate the kind of the image and the effort and the energy toward this new world. And absent that, then everybody kind of flails around and everybody's got a different idea about what they want. And, after a while, it all kind of comes together. But what we're trying to do here at the Arlington Institute, and what I try to do, is to try to facilitate this transition. And the way you do that, in particular, the most fundamental aspect of it is to build a vision of a new world. And so this is particularly helpful from a personal point of view as well, because in the face of all of this change and this uncertainty and the craziness that's going on around here, if you don't have some alternative, even a beginning kind of nebulous kind of notion about where you're going and what the alternative is to the status quo, then you're at the whims of all of the stuff everybody's throwing at you, and the press and the fake news and all the other kind of things. And so the sooner we start to frame up and start to get an idea about what this new world might be or should be, the better it will be for us all, and the better it'll be for the whole planet in terms of kind of moving in a new direction rather than just being thrown to and fro by what's going on right now. Now, the first step in building this image of a new world is to understand the underlying organizing principles or values, and there's a number of other kind of things, the presumptions and assumptions. There's a kind of four or five different kind of basic kind of notions that are the kind of the assumed or they're both explicit and to some extent implicit aspects of how you look into the future and how you then make decisions about what you're going to do. This new world is going to be based upon a set of values and assumptions and a variety of other kind of things that are going to be an integral part of how you look at the world. And it's going to be different. By definition, it's going to be different than it's been in the past. Otherwise, it'd be the same, right? So it's going to be a new world. And so the question is, what are those things and what might they be? Now, I've argued for a long time that that this new world could be built around a handful principles that if everybody understood them and embraced them would give extraordinary kind of direction about what to do and how to do it and how you make decisions and such. I've told you before that it's the difference between having a stoplight in a corner where somebody else tells you when you can go and when you can stop and so on, and having a traffic circle, right? So where there is nobody else telling you what to do and you know what to do because you look to the left. In North America, at least, you look to the left and see if somebody's there. And if they're not there, then you move yourself in and you make the decisions about what you're going to do. That's the idea. What are the underlying principles that give everybody guidance and direction and meaning, substance about how you move into this space? And so what I thought is that we could start this thinking about that kind of stuff, these kinds of things in kind of a definitive kind of way, and that it would help kind of frame, at least give you something to think about. In my case, what I'm trying to do is distill this down over time into a kind of basic set. This is amazingly important, by the way. If it turns out to be as what I think it is, then it becomes the basic kind of organizing platform, the intellectual platform for how this whole new world would work. And I wouldn't for a moment presume that what I'm going to talk to you about here is what it's going to be in the end, but I think that it's a really interesting and useful step in the right direction, and that it's pretty close. You know, it's in the ballpark. It's the right kinds of stuff. And so let me walk you down kind of a list of things and start to get a flavor of what these might be, and then they can be the basis for some discussion further on. So I would suggest that, I've tried to kind of organize these things in kind of a logical way, but this is a first draft, and so everything's subject to change, right? So the first thing is that everyone, and here, the idea is, in practical terms, that these are the principles that are taught to children from the earliest age and are the essential framework that we all understand and embrace and therefore go forward. It is in its own way the same thing as history and laws and social mores and other kind of things, how they function in today's world. But in this particular case, it's a new set of things that, although they will be familiar, what they represent is in the integrated kind of way is a whole new kind of twist and notion that if you do them all together, then you suddenly have a rather clear kind of decision-making matrix underneath the whole thing. So the first one is everything and everyone is an integral part of the creator. So if you start with that, and I mean, all of us know that that's the kind of the idea, but if that was the way the civilization, if that was the way a whole new world was formed based upon that and all the humans in this space, then you'd start to say, it's really it's a different thing. You're an integral part of the creator. The creator's not out there some other place on a cloud, whatever. That we are a part of that. It changes your sense of perspective. The second one is the highest objective of the human species is to evolve, to rise higher to higher levels of awareness. Now, right now, our government and other institutions are doing everything they can to tamp down and to hinder the evolution of our species. And in a sense, uh, that's disastrous. I mean, that is such an extraordinary kind of attack on the essential aspect of what we are all about and what we're supposed to be doing. I hope you follow that. Is that every time the government tells you you can't do something, what they're doing is constraining your ability to expand and work into another way and learn some new things that you otherwise might not have learned. And so, in fact, all of these external kind of constraints are antithetical to the whole idea of enabling and encouraging the evolution of the species. If you had a new world and everybody understood this idea is to run as fast as possible into a new space, then you would live a whole lot different way. You'd build, you'd operate in a different way. And what you would also understand, number 3, is that everything is connected and all actions affect someone else and everyone else for that matter. And again, that is antithetical to the general kind of notion that we've all been raised on, that say that everybody is on the outside. You guys are all independent. You're not me, I'm not you, and so on. And so we're disconnected. And if you could ever internalize, this is not easy, by the way, if you could ever internalize the fact that everybody is connected to everybody else, then it's a switch in mindset. It's a switch in concept about who we are. And the corollary or the extraction of that is that everything you do affects somebody else. That is really important, because that is something that you can use on an every moment kind of basis almost for making decisions, because you raise the question that says, if I do it this way, how will it affect somebody else or some other thing? I mean, you'd get rid of a military. You'd get rid of all kinds of things that we do right now if you thought about it in those kinds of terms. So the thing is, we're all connected, and all actions have effect on somebody else. You don't operate independently. You may sound like you and feel like you do, but you don't. And the 4th principle is operating in concert with all of nature is the highest value. So if you want a datum, a basis from which to understand kind of how this all should work, the idea is how do you operate most in an integral way with all of nature writ large, not just outside nature, but all of human nature, humans and animals and all of nature. I mean, that's a very intriguing idea. Would you do strip mining? Would you kill animals and eat animals if you did that? If if you really understood that you were an integral part of all of this, and by the way, that was the best way to live, then how would that would translate into really different kind of ways in which we all kind of work to get, live, and how we work together. And so then the next one is, there is an inevitable and equal response to everything that is done. That's karma. That's the notion that says that, by the way, we're connected to everybody else, but everything that you do and everything you do affects all over the place. And by the way, it comes back and affects you too. Some of us try to kind of embrace and understand the whole idea of karma, but the majority of people in this world do not. And certainly the institutions it's very hard. It would take me a while here to try to find an institution that I thought really realized that and didn't see themselves as dominating in some way or controlling or trying to, get rich or sell you something or something. If you really thought that not doing good was going to come back and bite you, then you'd really operate in a different way. And so if kids all understood from the very beginning that this is not an abstract kind of idea, that do unto others as you would have others do unto you, because it's going to come back to you sometime. Then it would really be different, and it would really smooth out how you operate, because you would never you would really think twice between cutting somebody off or being angry at somebody or any number of other kind of common things that we all do. The sixth thing is that everything is alive and to some degree is sentient and must be treated accordingly. It's one thing to say that I want to be kind of congruent with and compatible with nature, but it's another thing to look at it and say, God, they're all alive, all these animals. I mean, it's one thing to realize that your cat or your dog or something is more than a cow, I guess, and that has a personality and emotions and other such things. But I have psychic friends who have a really hard time eating vegetarian things, because they say when they go out to cut the grass or the wheat grass or whatever it is, they can hear the plants screaming because they don't want to die. Now I don't know how you deal with that, if that's kind of your degree of exposure and openness. But the point nevertheless is the same, and that says if you had a sensitivity to this and you realized it all in those kinds of terms, that everything was alive and sentient, I mean, you would really, you'd hug the trees and other kind of things, because you'd realize that they're not sentient in the same way that humans are, and animal, cats and dogs and so on. But nevertheless, they are alive and they're intelligent, and you need to see them in a different kind of way. And so there's a kind of a subset under that says, now you treat everybody else like you'd like to be treated, because you realize that it's all alive and it's all sentient. And if kids really were taught this in the beginning, and then the second point under that is that killing animals or people is not permitted except in self-defense. I mean, you can debate these things and shape them and change them and other things, but it's really hard if you start with the presumption that everything's alive and sentient and you got to treat it that way to kind of reasonably embrace the idea that we ought to kill billions of cows and sheep and whatever other kinds of things a year in order to eat their meat. I mean, it's just, I know everybody does it, and that's the way it happens right now, but there's a really interesting kind of twist in this thing if you go back to the fundamentals. And I know about Hindus and so on, and that this is not all new, but what I'm saying is that there's a new world, and if it started to see itself as congruent with nature and all of these kind of principles, it walks you into this space where you operate in a different way. The seventh one is all things are allowed as long as the others are not hurt or damaged or I kind of like that one. It has some problems, but that gets you out of all kinds of laws and regulations that I would like to get out of. that we really don't need these piles and piles and piles of regulations. There's thousands, if not millions of them telling us what to do. If you just knew that, that you ought to, anything's okay as long as you don't hurt anybody else. But then it raises the question, what does hurting somebody else mean? And you're going to have to work your way through that one, because it certainly can't be anybody who says, oh, I didn't like what you had to say. You've hurt me. And, now you're in trouble because you can't say anything because somebody else might misinterpret it and be hurt. And there's no way that you're in their mind so that you can't figure out what they're going to say and how they're going to be responded. But it's mostly about kind of physical and maybe economic or some other kind of things. But there is a wonderful kind of freedom associated with it that says that, hey, as long as you don't hurt anybody, you can do anything that you want. There's a principle that it's not in here. It's a derivative of the first one that says we're all part of the Creator, and says that we have extraordinary kind of power and responsibility and capabilities, and we're really quite capable of kind of this on our own. We don't need the government to tell us what to do, but you do need to make sure that you don't hurt anybody else. And so all things are allowed as long as others are not hurt. Number 8 is the purpose of life is to learn and make better decisions, thus generating better outcomes. I may have talked about this here in this forum before, but most of us, if you asked what the purpose of life was, you would say it's to learn. And I'd argue that that's not quite it. The purpose in life is to learn is to make better decisions, is to essentially learn how to make better decisions. Because in making better decisions, you then learn what the effects are, and you are able to learn how to do something differently the next time, so that you have a better outcome that comes out of the back end of the thing. So the issue is not so much as to learn something, as in the case of going to school or college and trying to learn something. The idea is how to do the decision making. This goes to intuition and the little voice and other such things. But how do you learn to make the decisions, and how it becomes kind of intuitive to make the decisions that allow you to move into and consistently going to find yourself eliminating most of the kind of negative kind of events that presumably that you had earlier in your life. That's the learning process, but the learning process is built on decision making. And number 9 is you are the ultimate determinant of and have the ultimate responsibility for your life and your future. Okay, this is a real twist on the whole sense of who you are relative to the rest of the world. Because right now we live in a world where the government and religions and other kind of folks are all trying to tell us from the outside what we ought to be doing, because what they think we ought to be doing. And if you flip that thing and say, you decide, you make the decision, and more than that, you have the capability to influence anything and everything about your reality. You flip the whole thing from being an outside kind of oriented one to an inside, to an interior thing, to personal empowerment. It's huge. And what it also does is you can't blame anybody else, because you determine it all and you have the ultimate responsibility. And if you really get that, it really enables and empowers you in really significant kind of ways. Number 10 is your health and therefore your health is determined by your thoughts and the state of your immune system. So you determine everything. And by the way, in terms of what your personal health is and the state of your body. It's how you think and how you maintain the immune system in your body. We've got our next speaker after this weekend at Transition Talks is Sally Fallon Morell, and Sally is the co-author of this book that was called The Contagion Myth until Amazon refused to sell it. So they had to change the title to some other kind of thing and take myth out. But Sally will convince you, and Tom Cowan, who is the other author of this book, will convince you that there is no contagion. There are no germs. That the whole notion of germs and that you can somebody else can give you some disease and you've got to wear a mask and all this business is all fallacious. It's all built around, among other things, Louis Pasteur. We all know about pasteurized milk and so on, and the whole idea of germs was Pasteur designed all of this stuff and sold it all and pitched it all and to the scientific community back 120 years ago or something like that. And as part of his will, he said no one will never be able to look at my notebooks, my experimental notebooks. And 10 or 15 years later, he had a nephew that had got a hold of him and was kind of teed off about him for some kind of reason and decided to make him public. And what it turns out to be that his Pasteur faked it all. He poisoned the animals in his experiment in order to get them to die so that he could support the ideas that he had. The whole idea of germs do not exist. And the whole idea of contagion is a made up kind of idea. But all of our science and all of our healthcare and everything is all built on that going forward, where our bodies are got trillions, literally, of viruses and bacteria on them, and every kind of potential disease in the world that's on your body. And the question only is your immune system strong enough to be able to defend against it? And so what that does is change twist the whole thing from saying that it's a problem from the outside and they're trying to attack you, the germs and the viruses and the whatever. And so you need help from the outside in order to defend yourself. No, it's your ultimate defense is the strength of your immune system, and your immune system is essentially equal to anything that there is. And so it's empowering, personally empowering. And so it's a really interesting kind of twist on this whole kind of relationship that each of us has to the larger reality. Instead of being dependent upon the outside, that you have the ability to make your own decisions and determine your own thoughts and the state of your immune system. Number 11 is that innovation, creativity, and new ideas are of the highest value. If you believe that evolution is the most important kind of underlying principle for the species, then the only way that you get up there is to unleash all the creativity and innovation that exists throughout humanity and throughout all of us. And what that does, if you buy that kind of principle, it changes everything about every institution works and how it works. And instead of beating on the person who's got the new idea, who threatens this status quo and all of the thinking of the people that have already been there and published all of their papers and stuff, suddenly all changes and everybody looks for the new ideas and celebrates the people who are creative and comes up with the stuff because it helps everybody and it moves everybody along. It's a real switch on everything. Number 12 is everybody must be given equal opportunity to excel in all situations. It's a variation of the same thing. It essentially says that everybody needs creativity. We're interested in creativity, and everybody be everything. And by the way, anybody, we give equal opportunity to anybody. I don't care who you are, you got equal opportunity. And that gives freedom to people. If you're constrained by money or funding or any number of other kind of things in education, what this would really do is to blow open the doors to anybody to learn anything that they can and become anybody that they want to. But it depends upon themselves. What you encourage is the internal kind of development that everybody, all of us, have the potential for. And so 13 is your home is inviolate and cannot be breached without your consent. This just comes out of the Bill of Rights. And number 14 is the government serves the people and exists only with their agreement. And again, this is part of the Constitution or the Bill of Rights. But in any case, the idea is that to flip the whole idea about the role of government vis-a-vis the people, turn it around so that they work for us. And if there's any fear in this equation, it's them being afraid of us. And that at any given time, that you can have a referendum or some other kind of thing, and you can throw them all out or collapse the whole thing and start all over again. And that was clearly the intent of the framers of the Constitution at the beginning. And of course, the government has gotten so large and everything that's lost. They are in the business of sustaining themselves against all odds. And what we need to do is, when we build this new world, is make sure that doesn't become the case again. So anyway, those are the kind of that's where I started with. I sat down and thought about this for a while and tried to say, what are the big pieces or the big chunks of how you'd start to think about this? It's not refined. It's not elegant. And one would have to come down and you get some very articulate and creative folks to kind of refine the whole thing. And my guess is that you could probably distill it down into 8 or 10, maybe fewer kind of basic principle, of which there are some kind of subsidiary kind of correlates. But there's something like that we need to start to come together and kind of agree upon, that becomes the platform for how you think going forward. Because if you distill that down and you could solidify around a set of those kinds of principles, you then have the basis to start to say, okay, now how do we do a government in that context? How do we do transportation? How do we do energy? How do we do any number of other kind of things that are an integral part of this new world? But you always look back to the whole thing and say, well, we can't do mountaintop removal because for all of the kind of reasons that are kind of obvious from that kind of a position, that kind of a platform. So I hope you found that interesting and helpful.
If you found that helpful and interesting, and you haven't done so already, why don't you just click on the link below and give us your email so that we can send you alerts for the next segments of PostScript. We'd love to be able to tell you beforehand when things are coming downstream so you don't have to go look for them. And this is the best way to do that. We assure you that we won't share your information with anyone else. Thanks.